Chris Palmer, who has just released his brand new book, Achieving a Good Death. And I am delighted to have Chris because I've talked to him before, and there is nobody better, I feel, to talk about end of life decisions. In and Chris, let me welcome you to the stage there, and we will get this conversation going. Hey there, Chris.
Hi, Steve. Great to be with you.
Oh, you too. And now I told people when I started, I said I am really charged up about this decision. I didn't used to be that way, Chris. When I started doing these online discussions and we'd have discussions on end of life, I just, I'd get sad and I'd be sort of timid and hesitant around this topic. And what I've learned is that these conversations about end of life are some of the best conversations that we can have,
Yeah,
whether it be with strangers or our loved ones.
yeah.
It makes us reflect on our life. And
Mm.
so I'm delighted to have you today. But before we dive into the discussion and learn about your book and some other things, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background and how did you become taking an interest in end of life issues?
Well, thank you, Steve, very much for that lovely introduction. I took an interest in end of life issues because I realized I was very scared of death and dying. Scared probably isn't a strong enough word. I was really petrified of it. In fact, growing up, I just didn't ever think about it. When I did, it was some in the future, nothing to do with me. It was other people who died. I wasn't going to die. But I'm 77 now. When I got to about 60, I recognized that this fear was not healthy. And so I decided, instead of going to therapy, I decided to confront it and study it and talk about it with people and try and work out what was going on. So I started researching it and writing about it and talking about it and learning about it. And I'm still scared, yeah, but I'm less scared. The more I find out about it, the more I realize that people, as they come to the end of their life, have options, have choices. Then it's a little less scary. And also, the more I learn about it, the more I realize, as my book title says, Achieving a Good Death, I realize that you can influence the type of death you have by the type of life you lead, by the type of preparation you do and planning. And so that's but in terms of my background, I was in the British Navy. I was a stand-up comic for 5 years. I was worked for Jimmy Carter. I worked on Capitol Hill. I produced wildlife films. I won an Oscar. I was an Oscar nominee. I've won Emmys. I've done lots of different things, but it wasn't until I became in my 60s that I started studying death and dying. I've now become an end of life activist.
Well, this is amazing. And folks, one of the best things about these discussions is they're live and interactive. And I love that Danielle has already shared. My dad held his own wake as well. He was a woodworker, and he also used to build custom caskets for people. Zahad says Tuesdays with Maury.
Oh,
Yes, a
excellent
good
book.
book. Um, and Robert says both of my parents got hospice care, one at home and one in a nursing home. On
Mhm.
their last days, both needed morphine and had trouble getting it. How can this
Mm.
be avoided?
Ah,
Would you like to address that now, or would you
yes.
like to
No,
later? Okay.
no, I'll address it quickly now. That's a problem, Robert. That's a problem. And the way to deal with it is by talking to the hospice. When you go to a hospice, interview them before you select them and say to them, I've heard people sometimes can't get enough morphine when they need it. And what do you do at your hospice to make sure that never happens? So that's all you can do is anticipate the problem and then talk to the hospice about it and make sure they will give you enough morphine. That is awful that your parents didn't have enough morphine, and I'm so sorry that happened. And all you can do is talk to the hospice ahead of time and say, please make sure that never happens to my parents.
Okay, great. And this is something for all of us to be thinking about for the future if we've got clients or we're professionals in this field. Thanks, Robert, for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, Allison says having an end of life doula can make sure families know what they're entitled to and help them communicate with the hospice team. Man, I love that. This is, I knew we'd have a free form discussion,
Yeah.
but Chris,
No, so
talk about
yeah. So
what Allison is
yeah, so
sharing.
Allison, thank you so much for that question. And the thing that people often don't realize, but you know, but often people don't realize about hospice is it isn't 24/7 care. Not at all. A lot of the work is still, I mean, as good as hospice is, and I'm on the board of Montgomery Hospice, I know a lot about hospice, and they are wonderful, but you still have a lot of work to do. The family and friends still have a lot of to do to look after the dying person. The diapers have to be changed. So wounds have to be morphine has to be administered, and so on and so on. The body has to be moved so the patient doesn't get bed sores and so on. Pills have to be given rectally. I mean, it's a very uncomfortable, very hard job. So hospice is incredibly wonderful, but there's still a lot of work. This is where to come to your question, Alison. This is where end of life doulas can be so incredibly helpful because they have time. Now, of course, Medicare doesn't cover end of life doulas. So the patient's family has to cover the cost. That's a problem if you don't have the money. But if you do have the money, hire an end of life doula. They are wonderful. They can be companions. They're non medical, but they can be companions. They can spend time with the dying person, and they can help they can help write letters to grandchildren, all kinds of things. So end of life doulas are excellent. Highly recommend them.
Excellent. Okay. Folks, we're going to get to Chris's book, but I love these questions you all are bringing in. Patricia says the death positive movement is alive and educating our culture through programs like Death Cafe, Death Over Draft, and or Dinner, and books like Chris's. And Patricia, I had never heard of the death positive movement,
Yeah.
but I just looked it up, and it says that this was popularized by Caitlin Doherty, who founded the Order of a Good Death. And I'm dropping in some of that I learned. But
Yeah.
but Chris,
So
tell us about the
yeah.
death positive
So
movement.
so so Caitlin Doughty is a wonderful person. She's written several very funny books about the crematory business, and she's an incredible leader. Anyway, she helped with others found the death positive movement. The death positive movement rests on certain precepts which are reflected in my book. That we should talk about death. We shouldn't be afraid of it. That a dead body is not unhygienic. That we need to celebrate life when people die, and so on. It's the things that are reflected in my book, and it's a very good movement and is helping to help people achieve better death. I highly recommend it. Go to you can Google the Order of the Good Death. And it's excellent to join, get on their mailing list. They are excellent. I highly support them and approve of what they do. And my book is a part of that movement, if you like.
Wow, this is cool. And I tell you what, this is what happens, folks. Every time we do these discussions, I learn about something new, and I'm sort of like, we gotta get those folks on. Well, here, Chris, how about we do this? Let me take a pause. Folks, keep those questions and comments and resources just flowing in. That's what makes these discussions absolutely awesome. But what I want to do is I want to share a couple of resources that I've already dropped into chat. First is Chris's website at Chris Palmer Online, and you can see there he's done a lot of stuff, but you can click on the Death and Dying link to get some resources. And when you click on that link, you can order his book. And he said the preference is Amazon. I put the link into chat. I'll put it on the recording link if you'd like to get a copy of his book. But what to that end, let's take a peek at the table of contents. I found that this is helpful with all of our authors. And Chris, can you see that there?
I can
Okay, great.
absolutely. May I quickly say, Steve, that all proceeds from my books, this is my 10th book, all proceeds from my books go to fund a student scholarships at American University, where I used to be a professor. My wife and I put in started that with $50,000, and the process from all my books go. So when you buy one of my books, like this one, for example, the money goes to help students.
Now, out of curiosity, what were you teaching at American
A
University?
filmmaking. I'm a wildlife filmmaker. I spent 35 years making films on dolphins and elephants and wolves and whales and it was a wonderful career. And so that I taught wildlife filmmaking.
Oh, wow, this is great. Okay. All right. So now what we got up here, I put it on two screens so everybody can see it, is the chapters of the book. And Chris, first, kind of tell us, we'll go through some of these chapters here, but how did you kind of organize this and how did you put all this together? And why don't we start with chapter one, too? What is a good death? What is a good death?
Okay, so let me start with that. What is it? What is a good death? A good death, Steve, is a death that the dying person wants. That is absolutely foundational. I believe in patient-directed care. So a good death is the death that you want. Now, having said that, there are some people who will say, please prolong my life as long as possible with as many medical interventions as possible, regardless of my quality of life. But that is not that's not what I want. But if a person wants that, they should be it's their choice, their choice. And so people, but in my case, for me, and I'll just talk for myself, a good death for me is being at home, being surrounded by my family, not being in an ICU with tubes and vents on me, and on a vent and a peg into my stomach and a tube down my throat. Not to have that, but to be at home, to be surrounded by loved ones, to be functionally cognitive enough to be able to say to my loved ones, "Thank you, I love you, I will miss you." Forgive me if that's appropriate, or please, or I forgive you if that's appropriate, and goodbye. Now, I've been having those crucial conversations that Ira Byock talks about. And then another aspect of a good death is of having your advance directive, which is a legal document describing how you want to die, having it followed. Uh, so a good death is with not very little suffering and pain, graceful, dignified, something that, as I say, the person wants.
Now,
Okay.
now, Chris, and forgive me, I know I'm going to dive down a rabbit hole here, but I love everything you're saying. Okay. And as you said, so a good death is a personal, it's everybody's personal preference. So somebody may hear what you're saying. It's like, no way. Like you said, I want to be on life support, this, that, and the other. However, if we, none of us have a crystal ball, and you'd mentioned something about cognitive health. Since you don't know if you are going to have dementia, do you think about these contingencies
Yeah.
if you might not be able to meet the definition of your
Yeah.
good death if you described it?
Yes, absolutely. So let's do a second to dementia, which is something I know you are very knowledgeable and concerned about. So I've looked at so what you need to have with dealing with 7.5 million people now have dementia. More and more of us are going to get it. So we need to realize that we may get it and we need to plan for it. The way to plan for it is to have a dementia rider or a dementia coder to your advance directive. The best dementia rider or coder that I have seen, I've looked at many of them, comes from Compassion and Choices. So go to cnc.org, compassionandchoices.org, that's their website, and look for their dementia values tool. I think it's called dementia tool. Just look at dementia, and you can go through that and produce a dementia rider for your advanced directive. And what this essentially does is say, well, I have mild dementia. It gives you a choice of what to do, but most people say, yeah, please do what you can to make me healthy again. When you have moderate dementia, you don't want to pull out all the stops, and when you have advanced dementia, then you might say, it's up to you, but what you might say is, look, if I get, for example, if I get pneumonia, if I have advanced dementia and I don't recognize my family, my quality of life is down to zero, then do not give me an antibiotic if I have pneumonia. Let me peacefully exit naturally. So you may say things like that. Anyway, it's very important to have a dementia coder to plan in case you do get dementia, because many of us will.
I love it. Okay. Well, let's jump back to your table of contents and let's see if we can't get through a few of these chapters, and then I promise folks I'm gonna jump back onto the many questions and comments that are coming through. So we talked a little bit about what is a good death. Chapter 2, live well to die well.
I'm a hospice volunteer, so I talk a lot with hospice nurses. And one thing I've learned from hospice nurses at Montgomery Hospice is that people tend to die better when they have lived better. So what do I mean by live better? Live better means that basically you live a decent life. You're a decent person. You have virtues. You live by the Stoic virtues of courage and wisdom and temperance and so on. And you have lots of good friends, and you're honorable. You have integrity. You don't lie. You don't cheat. You're not duplicitous and so on. So a good life is as a life where you are contributing. You're a giver. You overcome obstacles and setbacks and failures. You have life goals and so on. This is a good life, a life of purpose and meaning. And if you live a life like that, you're more likely then to have a good death, because you're more likely to death clean. You're more likely to do an advanced directive. You're more likely to do a dementia code. You're more likely to know about palliative care and hospice care. You're more likely to be knowledgeable about medical aid in dying and VSAID and so on. So you're more likely to have a better death if you live well. So that chapter is about living well to die well.
Well, and this I really synthesizes why I like these talks about end of life, because they help us live talking about death can help us, and thinking about death can help us live a better life.
Yeah.
Now the next one I love, chapter 3, decluttering, death cleaning, and getting organized. And I'm going to drop into chat a discussion we recently had on Swedish death cleaning. Tell us a little bit about what this means.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently. He's 84 years old, and he told me he's a bit of a hoarder. He lives in a house, 4 floors. It's very crowded with things. And he said to me, he loves his daughter. His daughter loves him. But he said to me, my daughter is sort of angry and annoyed at me because she said to me the other day, Dad, you're going to die soon and leave this crap for me to have to clean out of your house. Why? How could you do that to me? I've got a family to look after. I've got a job to do, and you're giving me a whole year's work to clean out your house. Why did you do so? Very important to death clean, which means to declutter before we die, so that job is not dumped unfairly on the shoulders of our survivors and loved ones.
Yeah, and it also again is a great reflection on what possessions we have, what they mean to you.
Yeah.
And anytime I've ever talked to anybody that has done that has said, I don't know why I was so attached to this, sweater or armoire or what have you. But lots of good techniques on that. This is great. Okay, chapter 4. This is a big one. Advanced directives. And I like that you say the conversation and healthcare agents. Tell us, what are you thinking about in this chapter?
Well, in this chapter on healthcare agents and advanced care, it's all about planning for the future. Atul Gawande, in his wonderful book, Being Mortal, makes the point very clear that people, often the difference between a hard death and a dignified death, an easy death, is when you have talked with your loved ones and told them what you want. If you don't tell them what you want, how do they know? And there you are at the ICU. When you're at the ICU, having got injured or near death, that is too late to discuss your end of life wishes for the first time. We need to discuss our end of life wishes early on in our lives so that our loved ones know. Now, an advanced directive is very good. Vital we do it. Only 40% of people have done one, and in communities of color, it's 20%. So, and there's very low numbers. All of us need to do more. We need to write our advanced directives and have a dementia rider to it. But that isn't enough. What you have then to do is supplement that with conversations with your loved ones, which might include your healthcare agent, about what you want. So when you die, when you're on your deathbed, when you can no longer talk for yourself, they know what you want. They're not saying to themselves, "Oh, what would Grandpa want? Oh my gosh, what do we do? Does he want to be? Does he want to have a hip replacement when he's 1 week from dying? They need guidance. So help them. Write an advance directive. Talk to them. Assign a healthcare agent with backbone, someone who can stand up to doctors who may be, not all doctors are like this, of course, but doctors can sometimes be imperious and arrogant and think they know better than the patient. So you need a healthcare agent who will say, no, Dr. Smith, I talked with Chris Palmer just a week ago before he fell into a comatose state, and he told me he did not want a vent, and he told me he did not want a peg feed into his stomach. So please do not do that. So you have a healthcare agent with backbone who can stand up against for you on your deathbed.
And you said 40% of people have advanced directives. I'd love to research the stats on how many people created an advanced directive but didn't tell anybody about it. And the legal documentation is very important. I don't want to discount that, but I actually feel like the conversation can be more important than the legal document,
Yeah.
because if you have the conversation, it makes creating the legal document a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No,
uh,
let me just underscore what you just said there, Steve. You're quite right. The conversation is more important because also you can write an advanced directive, but then your views can change. And as someone who knows you well, a healthcare agent who's talked to you can say, well, yes, 10, 20 years ago, he said he didn't want to have a vent, but I just talked to him 2 weeks ago, and now he's changed his mind. I think he's changed his mind. So they can represent you more accurately.
yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, folks. I see tons of questions coming in. Let's get through these 5 and 6. Then we'll take a break. We'll look at all the questions, and then we'll get back to the remainder chapters. But this is fascinating, Chris, and I love how you've organized it. Okay. Chapter 5: legacy letters, ethical wills, and memoirs. Uh, what are these?
Yeah.
What are legacy letters, ethical wills, and memoirs?
During when COVID started in March of 2020, we remember we were very isolated, and I started writing letters to my wife, to my daughters, to my friends, and I call these toast letters. And these were like ethical wills. I realized. I mean, my toast letters. I call them toast letters because I was toasting people, thanking them for what they'd done to me, thanking them for their support, telling them I love them and why I treasure them and cherish them. And I put a little image of a piece of toast as a little joke, the image of a piece of toast in the letters. There was nothing. But that's why I call them toast letters. But an ethical will is like that, a toast letter. I mean, an ethical will is a letter to your survivors, to your children or nephews or nieces, whoever, and it says to them why they matter to you, and it spells out your values. It spells out what is important to you. It may spell out what you hope they will achieve in their lives and the values you hope they will live by. And it's a wonderful thing. It becomes a cherished heirloom. I mean, can you imagine a great, 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 great granddaughter in the year 2136 finding this and saying, look at this, look what my great, 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 great grandfather wrote in the year 2024. How loving, how caring. We die twice, right? We die when our brains stop and our lungs stop pumping and our heart stops pumping. And we die a second time when the last person who knows us dies.
Mm.
And a legacy will, an ethical letter, this love letter to your survivors, is a way of diminishing the sting of both those deaths.
Man, I love it. This is great. And very inspirational too, to think about this. Okay, let's tackle one more chapter, then we're going to go to the questions. Chapter 6: caring for the caregivers. Give us some of your insight on this. This is a topic that we talk a lot about on this platform, and I found that there's so many different ways that we can support those who are caregivers.
It's a terrible thing. We have 53 million caregivers in this country, most of them women, unpaid, with a terrible burden. Looking after a dying person or a person who's very sick can be exhausting. And so one point I want to make immediately is that caregivers need to take care of themselves, because the constant round of changing soil diapers, you know, um, uh, managing the money, taking them to the doctor, moving them, getting them to on the toilet, and so on. I mean, this is exhausting, and so we really need to be compassionate towards these people. We need a national policy to help with this. People are suffering terribly, and they don't get thanked because the dying person often doesn't have the capacity to express thanks. They're dying, they're sick, they're in pain, and so it can be very difficult to look after someone like that. They can be cranky and curmudgeonly, and yet this person is caregiving, and no one is saying to them, thank you so much for what you're doing. And so it can be exhausting, and innovating, and a little depressing.
Great words of wisdom there. Okay, let's tackle some of these questions, then we'll jump back in the book. Okay, Pat asks, is your book published in large print?
No, I don't think it is. My publisher is Bloomsbury. I don't think they've done that yet.
Okay, but and Pat, one of the things I'm going to try to drop in to the chat is a discussion that we had on low vision and all the assistive technology that can help when we stumble into a book or a newspaper that we really want to read. And as somebody who's blind in one eye, I can really appreciate that technology. But that would be great at someday if it was in large print there. Chris. Okay, Robert says, is it true that most people die in an ICU? If dying in an ICU, if you happen to be in that situation where you're going to die in an ICU, what are some recommendations that you have? Well, great question, Robert.
Yeah. So I don't know what the percentage is, but most people don't die. I mean, people do obviously do die in ICUs, but I don't think it's a huge number. More people die in nursing homes and at home, and so on through hospice at home. But if you die in an ICU, then it's very tough. I mean, because often in an ICU you're on a vent. You're intubated, you have a peg feed, you have tubes come out of every orifice in your body. You can't talk. It's very sort of dehumanizing environment, and so what to do in that situation is all you can do is make the most of it. Have your family there as much as possible, and before they intubate you, try and say the conversations, try and say the things you want to say to people. This is why it's so important to have an ethical will and write letters to people, because then even if you can't talk because you're intubated with a tube down your throat, at least you have put in writing what you want to say to your loved ones. But it's very tough. There's no, and the doctors in these places are very compassionate and good, so they can help, ease the transition. But it's a tough situation.
Great. And I found a stat that says 8 to 35, the mortality rate in an ICU is about 8 to 35%, but that's the percentage of people that enter an ICU. So actually the majority of people leave an ICU. So someone says, have you experienced death cafes? And I saw that Patricia's on here. It's a bit too free flowing for me. So can people use your book in a book club format?
Sure.
Great. In fact, maybe we'll do that. Maybe Positive Aging will do a book club to read your book together. Great idea there.
That is a great idea. And
talk about death cafes.
Yeah, so death cafes are wonderful. Patricia Dubroff is on the call, is a wonderful person and very active in this area. But death cafes are simply places where people can come. They are free flowing. The point you made, the person who made the point is quite right. They don't have really an agenda. They have a facilitator, and people come and just talk about what's on their mind about death and dying. It's a way to break the taboo of not talking about death. Death and Dying. So I recommend them. Try them out. They're fun. I've been to several and enjoy them. And I encourage you to try them out. It's a place where you can talk about your feelings about death and dying.
Okay. Let's see. Um, okay. Advanced directives. Where are they stored?
Go to don't use five wishes. Go to the go to if you're in Maryland, as most of you are, go to the Attorney General's website.
Oh, these
And
people are from all over the world now.
okay, so go.
Yeah.
So if you're in America, go to your state's Attorney General's website, and you can find it there and just fill it out. That's
Well,
the
no,
best.
no. He was talking about where should you store
Oh, store.
your
Sorry, I
advanced
thought you said
directives.
find. I
Yeah.
apologize.
And he's saying in my records or at all my doctor's offices.
Both in your own records, but give it to your doctors, give it to your medical providers, give it to your hospice, give it to your loved ones. Give it to all the people in your life. So that people know what you want. So yeah, so sorry, store. Yeah, so very important to store it well, and so it's accessible to other people. So that's very important. Yeah, don't write and as Steve mentioned earlier, don't write an advance directive and just put it in a file away so no one knows where it is. Put it where people can find it, and I give mine to my wife, to my family, to my doctors, so people have it.
Okay. Let's see. People are scared of dying and death to the point they avoid it. Kudos to you for being open about it. So, what do you recommend to prepare people to talk about and plan for it, even though people don't want to do estate planning because they think it will come true? They will die soon after completing their plan. And
That's like
Allison commented, she said, perhaps having them understand what could happen if they don't prepare, but I'm curious, like your words of wisdom
yeah,
on helping people.
yeah. Um, uh, so I think this is a very good question, and I think the way to start the conversation is by saying to a parent or a child, look, I need your help. I need your help. I'm getting older, and at some point I'll need help. And that's one way. Another way is to say, do you remember how Grandpa died? Is that how you want to die? Is that what you want? I need you to help me with this, because I didn't like what happened to Grandpa. He was suffering, blah blah blah. That's another way. So there are ways of sort of opening the conversation up and encouraging people to talk about it. It's very tricky as people don't want to talk about it, and people do worry that if they talk about it, they're going to bring it about. That's like saying talking about sex is going to make you pregnant. This is not. Talking about death and dying isn't going to bring about death and dying. Yeah, the two things are unrelated. But it's important to talk about and good to find the sort of subtle ways to bring it up, which are not threatening to people. If you just simply say to people, "Look, I want to, how do you want to die?" You probably may not get a very good reaction. But if you say, "Do you remember how that neighbor died?" Is that what you would like? Another gentle and thinking about, finding ways to approaching it in a more supple way.
All right. Now, Irene says, how do you find a death cafe? And Irene, I dropped into your question there some answers, but and Patricia Dubras, who's on the call, runs an online death cafe that we can all join. But I also want to share there's a website called deathcafe.com. And there you can find all information about this and the movement and find these that are online and that are in person all around the world. But Chris, any thoughts on how death cafes?
No, I
Yeah.
think your answer, Steve, was very good. Just Google death cafes, as you said. Look it up, and you can put in your website and sorry, you can put in your zip code and find one near to you. And also reach out to people like Patricia Dubrove and ask her. And reach out or reach out to someone like me or Steve and just ask, and we'll give you resources to find them.
Okay, great. And Patricia, drop the link into your Death Cafe there, and I'll make sure to make that prominent on on the recording link. Okay, let's see. Zahida says it's wonderful that your funding goes to help the students. And let's see. Patricia says we're hearing more and more stories about advanced directives not being honored. Is there a group working on educating the medical community on how to best honor the choices of people at the end of life?
Yes, groups like Final Exit Network, the Hemlock Society of San Diego, the Funeral Consumers Alliance. There are several nonprofits that are working on this. Yeah, it is a shocking thing that some doctors will disregard an advanced directive and think they know better than the patient. And we have to oppose that. We have to support patient-directed care. We have to support people in their wishes. It is a problem, but I have to say, I think the movement is towards doctors being more respectful. I mean, in the past, doctors would disregard that and think they know best. We need to give this person radiation, we need to give this person chemo. But nowadays, I think more and more doctors are realizing that they have to be more respectful of patients, and they support the idea of patient-directed care. So they want to see what's in the advanced directive.
Okay, Danielle says, I found that my clients who have a life of faith are much calmer and at peace.
Yeah.
And the good news is that as people get older, it's been shown that there's more of a faith-based way of thinking, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. So
What's your experience been,
yeah.
Chris?
So I think people of faith, people who have a religious belief, have an advantage over people like me who do not. And and because they have something to look forward to, they think life continues. They'll be sitting on the right hand of God, and so on. And good for them. I am a secular humanist, and I think when life ends, life ends. But this is a I don't we no need to argue about this or fight about it. I mean, people believe whatever people have their own beliefs, whatever it is, Judaism, Islam, whatever, it's fine. People do have their own beliefs and agency over their own lives, and we should support that.
I love it. All right. And let's see. Sherry says, in addition to having the death you want, planning for your after death care, your funeral, your body disposition, while you can, will give you peace of mind. I help educate people about the growing number of after death options. And here I'm gonna make sure, Sherry, that everybody gets uh can see that message that you put. But Chris, I know we're kind of jumping ahead with Sherry's question, but one thing that I've heard you talk about is green burial and different types of end of life planning. Would you like
Yeah,
to make
sure.
some comments on that?
So Sherry, thank you so much for that question. And yeah, you will more likely have a good death if you have planned how you want your body disposed of, because you will feel more completeness. One thing about dying well is you don't want open loops, things which are not finished and not, unopened. And so if you've decided, if you've told your loved ones, look, I want to be flame cremated, or I want to have my body go through human composting, or I want to have alkaline hydrolysis, or whatever it is, whatever it is, or green burial, whatever. If you've done that, then it makes you feel better because you have eased the burden on your loved ones. So I encourage everyone to do this, to do funeral planning. That you're on my website, chrispalmeronline.com. You can find a free handout on funeral planning, all about this. My wife and I are going to be buried in a green burial ground called Reflection Park, which has just been licensed just outside Silver Spring. But green burials or natural organic reduction, which is where you put the body in a capsule, you add alfalfa and wood chips and straw, and over 46 weeks the body decomposes. And you turn into rich soil, or water cremation or alkaline hydrolysis, where you put the body in a stainless steel tube, and it's a liquid of just mainly water, but it's 5% alkaline, washes around the body, and in 14 to 16 hours, all that's left is the skeleton, which you then, the bones are crushed with a cremulator, as with flame cremation. People often don't know that, but in flame cremation, the bones are left there, and the cremulator crushes the bones to produce the ashes. So these are new options which are exciting, I strongly support greener ways of disposing of bodies.
Oh no, it's a wonderful movement. And let's see. Eileen has a question. I'm dropping it or a comment, and I'm dropping it into chat, and it relates to when we were talking about dementia advanced directives, the fact that you need, two doctors. The delay can sometimes happen because there's two physicians need to determine that I don't have capacity.
Yeah.
Is there any changes or movement
Yes.
afoot in that
Yes.
area?
Yes. People like Thad Pope and other leaders in this area are leading, are trying, and an organization called A Better Exit in California. These are organizations and people trying to improve medical aid in dying, and by like allowing nurses to write the prescriptions for lethal medications, and to have shortening the delays, as Eileen just talking about, the delays between the doctors making the decision, so that people can move more quickly along the path to hastening their death, because sometimes people are just a few days from dying and want to hasten their death quickly so that they don't suffer so much. And with all the bureaucracy around medical aid in dying can slow that down, as Eileen is pointing out. So yes, we need reformation, we need reforms to medical aid in dying.
And Polly, thank you for your comment. She says, please be very careful about telling people legal documents are not important. The conversations are vital, but don't lead people to believe that they don't need the backup. And yeah,
Oh no, they
Polly,
do.
I need to work on my phrasing of that. But one of the things like I'll get often is a family that will call and they won't go to an elder law attorney to get the documents because they found out how much it was going to cost. And one of the things that I've recommended is using some of the tools that are out there. Have the conversations, like figure out exactly, you can if you have these conversations and then you go into an attorney's office, you're not paying them that, like, and that's the irony, is most of us go to a law office to have the conversation we should have with our loved ones
Mm.
with an attorney that we don't even know.
Yeah.
Have the conversation, get the legal documents, get them both, and that's what I was trying to illustrate.
Yeah.
Um,
Very
and
good.
actually, this ties into something that Sherry's saying. In addition to creating an advanced directive, many people recommend that you could make a video about what's most important to you in life.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Yeah, absolutely. A recording works just as works very, very well. Yep.
Um, oh, Michaela, this is great. My my grandchildren couldn't read their father's toast letter to them because they can't read cursive.
Oh.
It's like a foreign language now. We
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah,
have a Google app that
yeah,
will
yeah.
convert cursive. Hey folks, I'm going to keep on going here. We got a pile of questions. It's 12:47 East Coast right now. Chris, can you hang on if we
Oh,
go over an
oh,
hour?
absolutely.
But
Long as
just
you like.
reminding people, this is recorded, so it'll be up at proaging.com later if you have to jump off. Um, Okay, let's see. Oh, I agree with Zahida, who says your topic about the second death. I'd never heard anybody talk about that, that you die once, but when the last person that you came in contact, and this ties in very nicely with that video, is that by creating a video, you live on forever, you,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Um, let's see. Okay. Allison says, I help people design legacy projects, including ethical will.
Mm.
Okay, great. Oh, here. Allison, I'm going to put this in chat so everybody can see it. Allison, and I think this is important with Allison and some of the other folks that are on here, is that we don't need to walk this road alone. And, you know, somebody said that they felt uncomfortable at the death cafe. Okay, we had a previous discussion where this came up, where the woman can't talk about death with her spouse. He won't listen to her. And I was like, if you go to a death cafe, there's a bunch of people, you don't know them, but they will listen to you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Um, okay, here we go. If Cricket says if you're likely to die, you might start out in an ICU, but then you realize that you're not able to recover, you will be moved to comfort care.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Good point.
and oftentimes that's an important function of hospice too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that I've heard, Chris, I'd love your comment on this, is that I've heard that we oftentimes call hospice too late.
Yes, we do. I mean, and our average stays at hospice in Montgomery Hospice are 11 days. But we need to follow the example of Jimmy Carter and Art Buchwald, who were there for a long time. And because you had to have you have to have a doctor say you're going to likely die within 6 months. So after 6 months, if you're still alive, you get recertified and then stay in hospice. And so this is very important. Yes, people are too late. And why do people go to hospice too late? It's because the doctors don't want to admit that they have failed. So they are reluctant to say to a patient, look, I'm sorry, I've done everything I can. I cannot do anything more for you. It's best for you to go to hospice. They're not willing to do that because who wants to admit failure? Doctors want to keep you alive. That's their job. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, but don't go too late to hospice.
Okay.
That,
Now this
and you get most out of a hospice if you go early.
here's a real life hospice story that Laura is sharing with us. She says, I've always been pro hospice. However, when my father was ill, he had hospice while in a facility,
Yeah,
probably a nursing home.
yeah.
And I felt that their top concern was medicating him so he didn't fall, which
Ah,
I understand, but it felt like they were prohibiting his ability to wake up.
yes, yes.
Care to chat about that?
Yes, yes. So I'm so sorry about that. I know exactly what you're talking about, and yeah, and sometimes the bureaucracy is worried about getting sued. If your dad had fallen over and broken his hip, maybe you would have sued they might have been afraid you might have sued them, so they medicate him. It's a really delicate issue, and yeah, yeah, and you need. So this is why I want to recommend before you go to a hospice, interview them, make sure they have your values, and ask them, what are you going to do? Are you going to over medicate my grandpa to keep him from falling? What is your policy on that? So talk to the hospice and 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 uh, and make sure they are going to act in the way that you want them to act. It's a delicate issue. Yeah.
Okay, now Sherry, I'm glad that you're bringing this up because so Sherry says I've read that apart from the COVID years, 80 to 90% of people die a slow death.
Yes.
Okay, and Chris, let's dive into this one because I think this statistic is why we're so scared of death and dying.
Yeah. Back in the the early part of the 20th century, that figure was far lower. But now, because people died catastrophically or of a heart attack or an accident, now in 2024, 80, 90% of people die a slow, lingering death because they have cancer and neurodegenerative diseases and things like this, which are slow. And we are not used to this. We are still trying to get our mind around how we deal with this. What do we do with people who live for years, with dementia with 10, 20, excuse me, 10, 14, 15 years? It's a huge challenge for society and for families. And there's no easy answer, but that figure's accurate. Most of us die slow deaths. A few of us, of course, will die from gunshot wounds or car accidents, whatever. But most of us will die slowly, and it's a challenge for us, for families and societies, on how to deal with that. How do we deal with that in a humane, compassionate way?
Man, okay, this is great. And this ties into, I see that Layden, who's been featured on our program, we did a discussion on taboo talks related to aging. And sex, we talked about sex and one of the things that we talked about was death. And she said that she was inspired to start her taboo talk series by going to a death cafe and
Great,
seeing how hard it was for people to talk about end of life. Great job
great.
there. Um, Okay. Okay. So, Patricia says we talk a lot about practical death pieces from green burials to what to wear. I'm often asked to have a specialist attend, and we focus on the subject. Okay, she's talking about somebody was asking what do they talk about at death cafes.
Gotcha.
Okay. Um, Sorry, folks. I like one of the things, if you spent the energy to type in a comment, it's an opportunity for us to come together around it. So that's why I sometimes stumble over these. Um, Several recommendations for mydirectives.com
Oh,
to
that's very
support
good. I support them.
directives.
Yeah, I
Uh,
recommend that website.
okay, and Five Wishes is heart-centered and gives loved one a better sense of what makes life worth living.
Yes, I recommend against Five Wishes has an internal contradiction because it's religious based. So
Uh,
I would not use Five Wishes. I would use the advance directive from your state attorney general's office.
okay, but that aside from that element of it is Five Wishes. Are they asking questions that could be helpful in this
Yeah,
process?
95% of it is excellent.
Okay.
It's that just little bit is so it's best to use another type. But they get most of it right.
Okay, got it, got it. Okay. Oh, this I've never seen this, and we'll have to check this out. Hospice nurse Julie has great YouTube and TikTok videos,
She's great.
and another and a book.
Yeah.
And Carmen, if we can get hospice nurse Julie on one of these discussions, I'm going to do some research, see if we can track her down.
Yeah, she's I highly recommend it. She's great. Her book is good, and her YouTubes are excellent.
Wow. Eileen says 95 to 98% of physicians in America are not educated on palliative care or hospice care.
That figure
Um,
may be a little bit high, but your point is very well taken. And yeah, doctors don't spend very little time learning in medical school about death and dying. Yeah, basically, your point is well taken.
um, and Sherry says, Sherry, I like this. On the bright side, dying a slow death gives us more urgency to plan whenever death. Oh, I thought you were going to go a different way. It gives us more urgency to plan for our whenever death, declutter, right legacy.
You
Yeah.
know, this is a good point. I mean, a slow death does give you time to say goodbye to people, to thank them, to prepare. So that's a good point.
Um, Zahida, my brother told our other brother that he felt sick and knew it was really wrong. He said to my other brother, I don't want to suffer. And we remembered that till he went to hospice. This was 9 months ago. Oh, wow. So Zahida, you're in the middle of this, and big hug with that that process. Um, let's see. Pam, great to see Pam Ostrowski here. Something to note, you get to choose which hospice company to use. In Phoenix, there's over 110 hospice companies. Chris, you want to talk about
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are two types of hospice, non-profit and for-profit. There are some good for-profits. There are some bad non-profits, but in general, non-profit hospices tend to be better. They provide more non-pharmacological therapies and like music therapy and pet therapy and aromatherapy and music therapy and so on. So try and find a non-profit hospice and interview them before you go there because if they are a religious-based hospice, they will have certain rules and regulations, and they may not be in alignment with what you want to do. So interview the hospice carefully before you go there.
Okay. And man, there are so many people on this discussion that are making comments that have been featured on our discussion. Folks, we have Ginger Smith on this
Oh,
discussion,
Ginger's
and
fantastic. Yeah.
I'm putting the recording of our discussion with Ginger, and you have to listen to this. She was in a nursing home and on hospice, and for 2 years, and she recovered and now is living in a condo in Southern California. And Ginger, man, I love sharing your story, and I'm so glad you're transparent about that. Okay. Let me, we're at almost an hour. I got another pile of questions here. Some people say they love the idea of a book club. And so I may test that out,
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah.
Maybe we do that after this event.
Yeah.
Um,
Fabulous. Fabulous.
and let's see. Oh, okay. Robert is talking about, does a good death include your ongoing cyber life that can live on in unless you have a good, yeah. So talk about that, like our digital life,
Yeah.
and then all this AI stuff that's out there now.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very, very good point. I mean, our digital life will live on after us, and so beware of that. Don't put things on there will embarrass you, and have someone who will take it over from you, who can manage it, after you die, or you may want to close it down, whatever you decide. But think about that. I mean, be proactive about thinking about your digital life and what you want to do with your website, with things that you've put there. You may want to eliminate some of them, or you may want to close down your Facebook site, or you may want to keep it alive as a memory for your family.
Yeah, and I think another thing, and I don't know if you dive into this in your book, but we oftentimes focus on our bank accounts and on things of this nature. All of this stuff is digital now, and so passwords and having this so that your family can come in and get access to
I have
these
a whole
things.
I have a whole chapter in that book on how to get organized for the end of life. It's very, very, very important. Chapter 3. Yep, yep.
Okay, great, great. Okay, Wendy says, oh, great question, Wendy. I can't believe we haven't talked about this well, we sort of have. But how does one best support a dying person, and what does one look for to know that the end of life is near? Man, what a great
Yeah,
question.
it's a great question. And of course, if you're in hospice, then a hospice nurse can help you with that. One of their big roles is one of education, but if you don't, then you can often tell a person who begins to approach the end of life, they don't stop eating and drinking so much. Their appetites go down. They tend to turn towards the wall. They don't no longer want to engage. Their skin becomes a little waxy, color will change, become a little cadaverous and pale. And so there's certain things happen, and the person who's the patient may know, and they may not want to talk about it and to admit it, or anything like that, but they often know themselves. But the body starts closing down, and as you get very close to death, the toes and so on will start turning blue, and breath will sometimes stop, and so on. So it's you can recognize certain things, but get help from a hospice nurse who are very experienced in this. Yeah,
Great, great.
it's a tough time.
Okay. Someone asks, why is morphine used at the end of life, even if a person is not in pain?
Ah,
What does morphine actually do to help the dying person?
yeah.
And
So
Allison commented here, she says it can also help with difficult respiration.
yes. So
Uh,
if you're short of breath, it can help. But if you don't have pain and you're not short of breath, you no need to give morphine. No, morphine is a painkiller. It's to deal with pain. And a lot of people do suffer from pain because they have an illness like cancer, which is hurting them. But if you're not in pain and you're not short of breath or other things that morphine helps you with, no need to take it. No need to take it. Stay alert, because morphine will dull your senses and make you sleepy and so on. So yeah, no morphine. Only take morphine if you need it.
Robert, Robert is at a lot of our discussions, and I feel like I give him a gold star every time because his questions are so thought-provoking. He says, you mentioned you started this because you were scared of death. Then you said you're less scared now. So what are you scared about now?
I'm scared about the end of my life, Robert. I mean, end of my life means that I will no longer have relationships with my friends and loved ones and family. It means that I will no longer pursue projects. It means I can no longer write books. So I can no longer serve on non-profit boards. I can no longer be a hospital volunteer, and so on and so on. So it's a big deal. It's a source of huge amount of grief for me that at some point I will die. So, and then of course I'm scared of the process of dying, which can involve, constipation, anxiety, regrets, and all the things that go with dying. It's a nausea.
And
Um,
what I've found with these discussions, because yeah, I mean, I'm less scared now than I was as well because I know I will die. I sort of think that prior to having open conversations, it was sort of pretending that I'm not going to die, and so knowing that I'm going to die makes me less scared. And the way you described that, Chris, and I never really put two and two together, even though I speak in public in a variety of venues, I'm always a little scared and nervous when I go up on stage. And I tell people, I'm like, I'm glad because that helps me prepare.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that little bit of fear of death or a lot of fear, we can channel that energy to make our life better and also to go through some of the hard steps that we're talking about in preparing.
Yeah, yeah, very, 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 very well said. Yeah, one of the benefits of dying and near realizing you're going to die is you realize you don't have much time left. So we don't waste time. We can really focus on what's important, what matters to us, because we know we don't have much time. So there's a benefit. There's a benefit to knowing we're going to die. We can take advantage of the little time we have left to do the things that need to be done.
Yeah, and Robert says, I appreciate your honesty. I hear you, and that's what I'm scared about too. And actually, I almost teared up reading that, Robert, because this is one of the coolest things about having a conversation like this. When we're with people that are willing to speak open and transparent about their end of life, man, this is a good tribe that I want to hang out with,
Yeah,
man. And all of you were brave enough to come to this discussion today with this title on end of life. Hats off to you, man, because we couldn't have been with a better group for this last hour. Thank you for saying that, Robert. And I agree too about the way Chris talks about this. Let me just take a quick glance because we're at an hour. And Patricia says, visualize your death in positive, just like you live in positivity. Great, great thought, because I think most of us don't look at it that way, Elizabeth, Patricia. Okay, I think I got through most of the questions. Whew, Chris, man, I could do this once a week with you, but we're gonna definitely do this frequently through next year. Let's mark this on the calendar
yeah, love
as
to,
something.
love
And
to.
folks, I love when somebody brought up the book club, I love playing around with the idea of doing a book club with Chris's book. And what I think I'll do is I'll start with you all that showed up for this event. And maybe, Chris, if we did try to organize something like that, maybe we could work with you or your
Yeah,
publisher to get,
yeah,
digital copies or
yeah,
something like that to test it
absolutely,
out.
absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely. Yeah,
this is great.
yeah.
All right, y'all. It's Thursday. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. We're coming up on the holidays, and I hope that goes well for everybody. And I hope also that this conversation, if you are connecting with loved ones in the holidays, that it inspired you to think about ways you might, pull a loved one aside and
Yeah,
and have a deep conversation.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks to the positive aging community.